How amazing that you get to witness and be a fly on the wall for what Adi claims to be the most powerful conversation to date that they have ever shared. I mean, that just shows you the amount of vulnerability and rawness that we share with you. We hold nothing back. Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And Soph, this is the end of the framily month.
I know.
I'm kind of sad.
Yeah,
Plus,
there's so much more to stay and do. And I want to interview my family, and there's just so much. But hopefully you guys resonated with a lot of these topics and our guests, and something spoke to you. We'd love to hear from you what you resonated with, and tag us in an email, whatever works for you. Send us a DM or just tag us and share on your social media so we can see what really you jived with.
And just wait for today's. It's powerful. Today's review of the week from Minecraft Gamer 720. We haven't had one of those. Way to walk the talk. I subscribed to the Ignited podcast after hearing Adi's interview on Mind, Body, Green podcast last September. Your personal relationship experience and success brings such relevance and credence to each of your episodes. Each of you brings a different perspective that blends science and intuition, spirit perfectly, and really gives depth to the interviews. You guys have improved in interviewing too. As a podcast junkie, I've heard a lot of couple interviews that do not have the knack that you do of really listening to the interviewee and allowing each of them to comment or ask probing questions without interrupting the other. Could be editing or whatever, but the end result is high quality. Thank you for your work.
That's awesome.
Thank you for that, because we don't do any editing.
No, we don't. It's straight through. And we're really trying to listen to your feedback and what you need and what you want. And, we can't please everyone, obviously, but when we feel like there's somewhere where we can do better or be better, we definitely try and adjust for you. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That means so much. Sophie, you got a quote for us?
So it's not so much a quote, but I picked a card for us. I'm picking from the deck Inner Compass cards. These are such beautiful cards. They're aesthetically really pleasing, and the words are really stunning as well. And we just moved into our house 2 days ago. And I picked these cards while I was waiting for the moving trucks to come. I was sitting in the middle of the empty house. I had just saged our entire home, and I got really emotional. I was actually saging it. Noah was sleeping for her nap, and our au pair was here kind of like hanging out in a different room. And I was by myself and just walking from room to room, kind of like saying things that came up intuitively and just clearing spirits and old energy and any stuck energy. And I got super emotional, like waves of emotion just filled over me. And I felt the presence of a lot of past people in my life from the past, and people who have passed on, from your family to my family to loved ones. It was just really intense. And it's funny because the card that I just picked just now is transformation. And that's exactly where we are right now. And it also really connects to the conversation you have with your sister in this episode and how you went through your transformations. And I just think that this card in general can apply to all of us in maybe in an astrological way. Seasonally, we're kind of moving out of summer soon and phasing into fall. And this episode, and then also where Adi and I are. So it's a big time for transformation right now. And I really love this reading. So I'm going to read from it now. Again, this is from Inner Compass cards. Life is constantly changing. Cycles repeat themselves continuously. The Mayan people recognized a pattern that moves from initiation to refinement to transformation to completion. Right now, you are in the phase of transformation. In this phase, you can let go of all things that no longer serve you. What remains is who you really are. It appears as if you are going through a crisis, stuck in the old, with the new yet to come. Remember that crisis is a transitional period. It is painful to let go of well-known patterns or people, even when they bring you stress and negativity. Letting go is needed to clear space for something new. This card invites you to allow all difficult feelings that might come up. As soon as you accept them, the sky will be clearer. Surround yourself to the energy of transformation. Everything will change along with you. Seize this opportunity to get closer to yourself and to surround yourself with all the things that make your life so valuable.
Yeah. You mentioned the interview with my sister, which was, honestly, I told you this a few moments ago, but like the most powerful conversation I've ever had with my sister.
How amazing, you guys, that you get to witness. I haven't even heard it yet. How amazing that you get to witness and be a fly on the wall for what Adi claims to be the most powerful conversation to date that they have ever shared. I mean, that just shows you the amount of vulnerability and rawness that we share with you. We hold nothing back.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Are you here witnessing every moment of our everyday lives? No, but when we come on to record these podcasts, we don't edit. We hold nothing back. We say what we're feeling in the moment. And there's just a certain level of beauty and rawness to that. So just know that.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's, we tell so much. So the family, I had this idea when we started this month, and it just barely happened because we had to get it in right in time. And my sister's on the other side of the world. But we always hear stories from one perspective. Like even the stories you talk about with your mom, stepmom, brother, dad, we always hear your version. And I know that there's another version to my life, the one my sister went through. There's my mom's and there's my dad's. And I don't get to hear my dad's anymore, but I get my sister's. And so to sit here and just really go through some of these pivotal moments in our lives that I've been talking about and have been processing for myself, it was pretty powerful. And, you mentioned this quote about transformation. I want you to pay attention or think about that passage when we talk about the motorcycle accident, because we talk about it in a transformational way, but then to see my sister's point of view on it is really, really powerful.
I can't wait to listen to it.
Yeah. And, we wanted to remind you guys, this family month was brought on by another mom. It was brought on by Ashley, who we just recently had on here, the woman who started Love Bug Probiotics. And
she was just recently named one of the top 500 companies by,
I think, Inc. 5000
Inc. 500.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Inc. magazine, I love it. I was in an event the other day and they said Incorporated magazine. It's Inc. Inc. magazine has a 5,000 and then a 500 company list, and they rate it based on growth and expansion. It's so beautiful to have one of our friends do this. And the thing that's most beautiful about it is they built it because they built a company that cares about lifelong health.
Yeah.
And whether it's the probiotics we give our baby with every single one of her bottles, because now that she's not feeding as much, it's like she still needs to get her probiotics. And so we put those in her bottles, or for us.
Yeah. When we travel, I mean, anytime that my stomach feels off, I take Love Bug with me everywhere. It's the first thing, even if I'm going on a 2-day trip, the bugs, the bacteria that are in the water, in the food, in the vegetables, and everything in the air that you breathe in different places, your body gets used to what it gets used to. So if you're traveling, I love taking Love Bugs with me when I travel, and same for the kids, and just when I'm feeling off, when I feel like I need a little boost.
Yeah. I try to take it every day. I remember I'm almost more of the day, but the fact that it's allergen free, and just like your stuff with Philosophy has no added preservatives or additives or anything like that, is really, really amazing. And we've got that beautiful code for you. Ignited25 will get you 25% off. And you sell it on your site too.
I do.
So wherever you want to get it, you can get it there. And we also wanted to make an announcement for you about Ignited itself. So Ignited has its first annual event, Ignited Glow.
Woohoo!
Whoop, whoop. It's going to happen.
So excited.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. All of our friends, the same people you've heard here, Alexander Roxwell, Shaman Durek, Busy Gold, like the same people you've been hearing here, giving you movement, meditation, inspiration, and education every day for 3 days in mid to late October. So October 18th to the 20th. There are still some early bird tickets left right now. bit.ly/Ignited Glow, all caps, is the code for that, the URL. We will give that to you in the show notes as well. Come play with us. Check it out.
It's only just gone on sale, so please go get your tickets. It will sell out, and we're so excited. It's going to be the best event that I've ever put on because it's ours.
It's ours. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be so, so powerful. Maybe we'll even do a live thing like this from it. This is a long conversation, guys, but it literally, I mean, Sophie said fly on the wall. This is literally like you just got to sit in like our own
therapy session.
Just the deepest. I mean, I love that we just got to have this conversation. My sister was a little, she was a little nervous before because it was her first time on a podcast. So give her some love.
She's the cutest human. We need to like just put a picture of her face on this because she's just so cute.
We'll do it.
And such a good human. So I can't wait to listen to this and love you all. Thanks for listening and let us know your thoughts.
Yeah. See you on the flip side.
Mwah. This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fix all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back. In closing for Framily Month, I really felt like the best way to do this, the best way to move this forward for me and hopefully for you guys too, is to actually talk to Framily. You know, the other guests we had, all the interviews that we had were people talking about their families. We haven't had actually anybody talking to their families. So I'm really, really, really excited. I have to say, out of all the guests we had, this is the guest I'm most excited about. She's not that excited to do this. And so if you were all here, if we could do like a little warm round of applause, that'd be great. But today we're going to talk to my sister, Shirley. How you doing?
I'm good. Hi. I'm doing well.
Good. I was pointing out to you before, this is, I think, the first time literally we've ever spoken in English.
I don't think I think ever since I was 10 years old and you told me that we're an Israeli family, and therefore, despite having just moved to a new country and me wanting to practice and learn how to speak a language, I knew maybe 3 words in. Yeah. We don't speak English between us because we're Israeli and we will speak Hebrew. And from then on, we always spoke Hebrew.
We did. I'm always amazed that somebody gave me the power to be able to do that. But I'm also really happy about it because now you speak fluent Hebrew and you, even though you lived in the States for like 15, 16 years, and now
25 years.
Time flies way too fast. And now you live back in Israel.
It was a gift.
It was. You're now in Holland. And you know, we talked about this again a little bit before, but it's so frequent that we hear stories from one person's perspective. And when you hear a story from one person's perspective, you just kind of believe whatever comes out of their mouth because that's the way they see and saw what happened. And that's nice, but I just recorded a podcast that I think actually will come right after the one that we're doing here about how even though I talk about my story over and over and I use it in my work and we use it here in the podcast, and it's, you know, all the people who know me now see it as this like wonderful victory overcoming story. And it definitely has that aspect to it. But it doesn't take into account all the other people who were actually part of the story while it was going on, when it didn't feel like a victory, where it felt like the farthest thing from a win. There was no overcoming. So I thought, you know, Ignited is about nothing but radical transparency, right? And so I thought it could be really cool for us to actually have a conversation about what you lived through and what the experience was like for you.
Yeah. Happy
Sounds
to.
awesome.
Sure.
So you already mentioned this. You were 10 years old when we moved to the States. I remember the process being something along the lines of mom and dad came to us and they said, hey, we have this opportunity. We can go to America for, I think it was like 2 or 3 years was the initial thing, right? Do you want to go? And I was like, oh my God, amazing, America. I've never been. It would be such a fun trip. What was that like for you?
First of all, I don't have a recollection of whether they said 2 or 3 years. It's what I thought as well. And I remember talking about it with mom since, and she swears up and down that she never said 2 or 3 years. They never said that. It was for however long. But we both know that mom's recollection has taken a few turns over the last few 10, 15, 20 years.
Well, and you also said you like to compartmentalize, you said. Mom likes to rewrite.
Yeah. Yes, mom likes to rewrite things. Creatively rewrite.
Yes, she's
so
that's what happens.
Exactly. I do have I have some sort of spot recollections from that period. I remember the sit down conversation about this move happening. I think I was really young and I didn't quite get what it meant. I remember your excitement about it being America, as we call it in Israel,
Yep.
not the United States, America.
Yeah. North,
I remember feeding off your excitement somewhat and thinking this must be something cool that's going to happen. It's a place that's supposed to be in some way exciting to go to. I remember being upset about leaving my friends there, but being sort of not rewarded, but being kind of bought off with the idea that we'll have a big going away party, which we did. We had a really big going away party for me with my class. That was really fun. And I remember sort of feeling like an adventure, and it was a summer break. It was a summer after 4th grade for me, and we always went traveling anyway. So kind of started off in a sense almost like every other summer where we went traveling, and then we figured out that things were changing.
Yeah, and right. We went to Disney World right away. It really did feel like a great summer trip. Even one of my friends from Israel came with us.
Yeah.
So it really did feel like just a vacation. And then you said it perfectly. Things changed.
Yeah.
Now I always talk about it as, getting to a new country. You were starting junior high, right?
5th grade. I was the last year of elementary.
Got it. So, and I went right into high school, and I talk about how I didn't know it at the time. And, when you have a big shift like that, you just adjust, like you just do whatever you have to do in the moment. But it was really hard. Like I knew nobody knew me. Our parents would, as adults, they had like adult friends. And so they knew some people, and we got introduced to those people's kids, but they weren't friends.
Right.
And how I felt maybe for the first time, like I was aware of having social anxiety with friends in Israel, but it was pretty well taken care of because I had a lot of people that I'd known for a long time. And when we moved, it was like, I knew nobody. I spoke the language, but my accent was weird. So I was still a foreigner.
You learned it in Britain. Yeah.
Yeah. I was foreign and new to all these groups of people. And so it was definitely the first couple of years were really hard in terms of feeling like I belonged at all. And we were poor, like poorer than we'd ever been ever. Now we were never wealthy in Israel, but we were broke. Like mom had to literally calculate how much money we were going to spend on food so we could pay rent. That's how I remember it. Yours, I think, was even tougher because you spoke like 7 words of English or something.
I think mine was tougher in terms of practical things that had to be done, but I've always, ever since I was old enough to realize what we had gone through, I've always said and always thought that your transition must have been much harder than mine because of our age difference. I don't think I was aware at any time until very recent years that you had already felt like you had any sort of social anxiety or any issues like that, because you are my big brother. I worship the ground that you walked on ever since I came to this world. As far as I was concerned, you were the king of the world with me, with your friends and the neighborhood. So I never realized that until more recently. But I always said that moving at high school age must have been much more difficult than what I had gone through. I had the language barrier, which was huge. I had a lot of very good friends. I was very, I was very connected, very in touch with all of my friends from back home. I was a really good student. I had a lot of things going on, going for me in Israel, and it was hard to move in that respect. But things for me adjusted relatively quickly, I think. The language thing was faster than it would have been at an older age. I was taken out of the class when I always joke that I didn't know what class I was actually sitting in unless it was math and there were numbers on the board. Wow. Or if there was science and there were pictures of science-y lesson type things. I had no idea what class I was in. So that was hard as coming as a previously good student. But the rest of the things at 10 years old, initially you're kind of strange. You don't speak the language. People don't really know how to treat you. It's before girls get mean. It's before kids get really mean though. So I had slipped right in, learned the language within 6 months probably, and started to make a few good friends and felt okay. I think it was hard at the time for the first year or two also, but I don't remember it as being traumatic. Yeah. Whereas I think if I had been 14, it would have been more traumatizing.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally possible. I also wonder if part of it is just resiliency, right? Like you landed on your feet and you kind of adjusted. You're right. I mean, I don't think anybody knew about like any social anxiety I had. Again, like having a real close group of friends really buffered me in Israel. So I don't know that it became clear how insecure I was growing up until I had to really be secure to be able to deal with the environment that I was thrown into. Because in Israel, again, half the kids that I went to school with, I'd known since I was 5 or 4. And so they already knew me. I didn't have to figure out how to play the game. But you hit on something else that was really important. And you said it took within a year or two. So a couple of things. First of all, the way I remember it, I wasn't like, I always had a weird, like impulsive streak, but I feel like my rebellion always only started after we moved to the States.
I remember stories of things that you did as a young kid that might have been the young kid's version of rebellion, though. So I'm not sure that it really started only after we moved.
Who knows?
Stories like you hanging out of a balcony come to mind. Stories of you as a much younger child leaving the house, closing the door, and walking out of our building and being found near the river in a park near a house at some early hour in the morning because you were a little bit jet lagged after a trip to Scandinavia and being used to walking outside on your own. Things like this come up that I don't think I would have ever done. I think we were different in that sense from birth. So I'm not sure that the rebellious streak necessarily started as much as it maybe took off.
Got it.
At that point and kind of became exponentially larger and greater. Yeah.
No, you're right. When you talk about it like that, like I remember one of the things that I always talk about in the story, I don't know if I even talk about it in the book all that much, but I talk about the stuff with Dad, right? Dad almost leaving. And it's so hard to talk about him now because he's passed and I don't want to name his name or anything like that. But, like our dad almost left the house for like a few days. I don't even remember how long it was, but it felt like it was like 2 or 3 days at most or something.
I think it was, yeah.
And I remember you and I bawling, just crying our eyes out one morning because Mom told us that he's leaving. And we're like, he always leaves. What do you mean? She said, no, he's gone. Like, he's not coming back. And we lost it.
I remember something about the words like his closet is empty or like he actually took his belongings or something like that.
I didn't even remember that, but I just remember you and I bawling, like crying our eyes out before school. And then Mom, of course, in true mom fashion, be like, okay, time to go to school.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? The world just flipped upside down and it's time to go to school.
The wall that our mom is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we went to school and I don't think it was that day. Again, I don't remember this incredibly well. I think I was like 8. So you must have been like 5, something like that. But we came back home and then like the next day or the day after, that was back home. He was just back home and like I remember that never resolved. So for me in my head, that was a huge shift in my world. Like I never even thought that couples could end. We didn't I don't think we had any friends who had divorced parents at that time. I don't it shifted my entire view of the world.
Yeah, I think it definitely took a very, very big place in my life. It was a moment that sort of carved into my life. I think it was the first experience I had with betrayal.
Yeah.
Um, Not even necessarily betrayal towards mom, but betrayal towards us. I felt
Yeah, abandonment.
an abandonment.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what's
It
crazy
was.
though? This is the first time you and I have
Yeah,
ever talked about it.
it's true. I feel like it came up once,
Came up
but
right after
almost
we
like,
passed
yeah, yeah.
because
I
I
remember
found out that
something in the past 10 years, like a mention of it.
well, because I found
But
out that I didn't even know the whole story. Because you guys, I moved away after we were in the States. I moved away at 18 or 19 or something. I moved to the other side of the country.
yeah,
And apparently the three of you went through a lot more, or you and mom went through a lot more while I was gone, or at least mom felt more safe sharing stuff with you that she never did with me. And so I think that's the only time it came up, but it was in passing. It was like, oh yeah,
very
that thing
much.
happened. And it was without a doubt. I mean, because the reason it even came up to me is, you're saying the rebellion started early. And I remember it made me, I don't know what it did for you, but it made me hate dad for a long time. I don't think you ever hated dad, but it made me literally use those words about him.
I could understand that. You're right in that I probably never experienced as hating him, but but it changed my trust in him. I think it
Mm.
changed my trust in men for a while, for a long time. I think until I found my current husband, my only husband. um, it it made me really angry. Um, it made me see him in a different light. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
and
again.
and I think not so explicitly for a long time. I think
Yeah,
sort of in the back of my mind until I was old enough to understand what it is that happened and what it really meant. Initially, it was just feelings, as you said. I was probably around 5 years old. I didn't know to put all those words to it, but I felt very much like something had changed and a lot of distrust. But over time, when every time it popped back up in my head, and as you said, I compartmentalized. So it took a while until that happened again. But
yeah,
whenever it did pop back up into my head, it definitely made me, um, in some way, angry at what had happened and angry at him.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting to have this conversation because normally when I have this conversation, it's with somebody else. So either something like this happened to them in the past and I wasn't there for it, or something happened to me and I'm sharing my story, but they weren't
Yeah,
there for it. And it's just one of the things that, I mean, I love our family and I think our family does incredibly well given the shifts and stuff like that happen, but we definitely don't talk about things like, because that's, to me, that's one of the biggest moments that's ever happened in my life. That moment, moving to another country, to the other side of the world, and then probably my drug addiction and my arrest were like the next big set of things that happened. It's not that much. It's like 3 or 4 things before I got married that like marked my life. And and the other ones
we
we talk,
don't sit down.
well, the other ones we talk about because I talk about them all the time. I can't stop. But the personal ones, I think like we're of the family, and we talk about dad's kind of upbringing in Scandinavian sort of, just get up and do what you need to do and don't talk about it too much. I always joke
Be tough.
dad was the guy who I would call in the morning, or he would call me probably in the morning, and I'd have a whole conversation with him, 20 minutes on the phone, and then I talk to him.
Hmm.
You say, oh yeah, his dad's in the hospital. He had surgery early. So I'm like, what the hell? Like, how does my dad have a surgery? And then I talked to him for 25 minutes. And the fact that he's in the hospital just having surgery doesn't even come up. And that's kind of the way we grew up. And I know in clients, I see it all the time. When you don't learn to talk about things that bother you and are emotional and are painful and are tough, you just don't talk about things that are bad and emotional and tough. You just kind of go through life just walking through it. And this was the first moment that it marks for me. Like, that's one of the times where it was started. Shit happens. Don't talk about it. Just move on.
It's interesting. I mean, you're definitely right that we don't talk about a lot of things, at least within the nuclear family setting.
I guess we've found partners that allow us to have those conversations.
Exactly. I think we do. I think inherently both of us do want a certain amount of talking. I think I tend to be somewhere in the middle in terms of my personality in my current nuclear family. I do talk about stuff, but I also maybe I don't. Actually, I take it back. I do discuss things, but I think within our nuclear family, to a certain extent, it's things that feel somewhat hurtful or embarrassing are the things that we don't necessarily open up and talk amongst us. I think I'd have to. I mean, I'd probably have to summarize it as that.
Yeah. And then, but again, like, we get along really well. I mean, I know a lot of other families where they can't say what we say about our family, which is like, at the drop of a hat, whatever. We don't have big fights either. We don't, all of us pretty much always got along. Again, we're going to get into the craziness in my life here in a minute. And so there was definitely a period when we didn't all get along, but before that insanity and after it, I think it's safe to say that we've had a pretty solid relationship. And so
I think I've said it before. I think our family is dysfunctionally functional. I think, a lot of people talk about dysfunctional families. I think there is a lot of dysfunction, or there was a lot of dysfunction, maybe now a lot less. There was a lot of dysfunction in our family growing up in a sense, but we were really, I think, short of the, I don't know what to call it, short of the part of it, short of the path that you're going to discuss next that you went through, short of that, I think we were relatively functional. Now that makes it sound sort of silly, like all the crazy stuff that happened with you isn't functional. There's nothing functional about it. But in the end, when it all came out and everything was, figured out, it was functional, and that, everybody kind of came out to the rescue and helped you immediately and got up on their feet and said, we're here for you. Yeah, so it's weird that I think we functioned pretty well growing up for all those issues that we're discussing that we had, although you obviously, I think, had more difficulties with it, I think, adjusting to it.
Yeah. And I mean, again, even as we talk now, I wonder to some extent, well, maybe not. I mean, like, the emotional disconnection, the ability to have really crazy shit happen and not talk about it, was there before my insanity started. But it definitely, I think it helped it get worse by, as long as things seemed okay and nobody really knew what was going on with me, we were just fine. It's when things really started taking a big turn and it was impossible to ignore that my life was going really downhill really fast. Then I think, and this is where maybe we can talk about it, like, because I don't know what it was like at home. I know for sure. So at 14, I started drinking. It was part of like the Israeli Boy Girl Scout thing. That's where I learned about it. And I started drinking in one of those. Did you ever go to those sleepaway camps they would have for like a weekend?
No.
So I went to one of those, and that's when I got introduced to alcohol. And then I started drinking in Chicago. But then we left pretty quickly after that to upstate New York when we were in Rochester. And so when we got to Rochester, I already knew how to drink. And that was my way into the social circles. And then weed got introduced, and that was another way in. Again, I always feel like, because I never saw you as having the same like social anxiety, difficulties getting along with other people. I feel like I use those things as my crutches to connect to other people, whereas you just made friends. And I was like, what can I do to connect? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I mean, I think all of us, you were there at a really tough age. We all have our angst at that age. We all had our insecurities at that age. I had these two groups of friends, and there was a little bit of a battle between, me being kind of feeling like I'm pulled in between them. wanting to fit in with the one, feeling like the other was resentful of me for trying to fit in with the other one. I mean, I definitely remember a certain sense of trying to fit in, but I always assume that everybody feels that way at 14 to 18 years old. It's, kids are nasty.
Yeah, I think that's probably totally true. And so, like, by the time we're upstate New York, I remember things starting to already fall apart. Like, I was 16. I was not running away, but I was disappearing and not showing up at home. I was ditching school constantly. Dad knew, but he wasn't really around all that much. Again, like in Israel, we never saw him. So even without him leaving, like he just worked all the time. So we literally never saw him.
It's interesting you call it. This is also a matter of perspective. Sure. It's interesting. I don't remember childhood as never seeing him. I remember him working long hours, and I remember him being away on call once a week. I remember the day, it was on Tuesdays. But I don't feel like we never saw him, which is interesting. I mean, I don't know what it means, but it's interesting. It just goes to show that stories can sound so different coming from two people that lived in the same house.
Totally. And that's why I think this is so powerful, is like, not even for our story per se, because some people listening right now have totally different stories, but just to see what the exact same existence looks like from different angles. So like when we're in upstate New York, the way I looked at it was, there was a little bit of a fuck you for sure in there, in the rebelliousness, but there was much more. I had a group of friends. I had found a group of friends. I could pretend to be more American by the time we got to upstate New York. Like I was 100% a foreigner when we were in Chicago in the first move. And the second move, now I spoke English much better. I could just sneak in and just kind of seem like a normal kid. And so I did, but again, using the tools that I had. So I was smoking weed pretty regularly, and I was drinking. I always did well in school, but I was always also pretty lazy in school. And that was true still. But it was
true in Israel.
And now in the States, it really mattered.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get into the most amazing classes. I didn't get the most amazing grades because I was just lazy. And work, I never learned to do the work. It's, by the way, still something that's hard for me. But and so I didn't look at it. I looked at it as rebelliousness only when like dad would try to stop me or mom would try to stop me. But the rest of it just looked like, these are my friends. This is what matters. I'm going to do that part of it. Now you're still in junior high when we moved, like at 16, right? When I'm 16, you're 13 years old.
Yeah, I was 12 or 13, yeah.
And so
went into 7th grade there.
Yeah. So like what I'm wondering, that's to me where the beginning of the end comes. Like that's where the trajectory starts really falling off. Were you aware of stuff happening already then, or no?
No, I wasn't. I have to say that not only your trajectory went off then, but I think we went off in completely different ways at that point. Like instead of being leading parallel lives or intersecting lives, we just went off into two different corners of the world. I don't remember anything about what you describe. I mean, by now I've heard the story and I know how you perceived everything, but I don't have personal recollection of any of that other than the school stuff. But I was always sort of aware because there was always talk in the house about how Adi is so brilliant and so smart and has such potential and doesn't use, a small percentage of his ability, can do really well without ever studying for tests, can do really well without ever being in class. So there was always that running story of you not really being a very studious student. But that's the only, whereas I was very different from you. I worked really hard and I was a very, very dedicated student and made sure to always do my homework before I went out with friends and things like that. So that's the only running story in the back of my mind that I actually personally experienced, but not any of the other stuff. I didn't know the other stuff.
Got it. That's really interesting. So like, cause I remember there's some stories I remember, like, so remember I was in a band in high school, right? And
Yeah.
we would practice downstairs, which Dad hated. Like I remember he would leave the house because we had real drums in the house and it was so freaking loud. And during that time I was like, again, drinking, smoking all the time, but it hadn't made impact on you yet, which is great. I mean, I'm happy to hear that, but cool.
No, I was in awe of you because you had the band and you guys were cool. And I think I had a crush on one of the guys in the band whose name shall remain unsaid. But I never had any awareness of any of this.
That's good.
To me, again, I was still worshiping the ground that you walked on. I still had no idea, with a distance, because it was such a difference in age at that point that I was really not part of your life anymore, other than coming down sometimes to watch your practice, your rehearsals, or coming to a show here and there. But we really had no real interaction in terms of our lives and social lives, and like in any sense playing or anything like that together, as we had when we were younger.
Now when we talk about it, that's one of those things that makes me sad, right? Like, we could have, I mean, your school was over there, like it was 150 yards from my school. It was just two different buildings.
Yeah.
We could have, but I think this is the moment, like, not this in particular. I think this streak is probably a pretty long one, but there was definitely an egocentrism thing of like, I was very focused on my social circle and my people, and that's it. And that's like the only thing that mattered at the time.
If it means anything, I don't think I ever saw it that way to this moment until you said that. It never occurred to me that we were supposed to be close at that age. I always assumed that age difference that we had, where we were always a school apart, that it very naturally meant that we couldn't really be close during those ages, that we had such different lives at that point, whether they were functional or not, that we would not be able to truly be good friends, as I call us now, to truly get to really have any sort of a joint life, beyond maybe family dinners or something like that. I always just thought that.
Yeah. Again, right. So interesting. It's just, you just adapt to whatever happens. Like
to me that seemed normal at the time, because I didn't know all that backstory that I now know. It just seemed very normal to me that I was sort of distant from my older brother. I do remember interactions being somewhat strained. I remember us snapping at each other quite a bit. I remember us getting annoyed at each other quite a bit. Again, for a long time, I assumed that was just the age difference, that you thought I was a kid, that I was trying to be cool in front of you or something, or to at least interest you in some way, and the age difference made it very difficult. I always assumed it was something like that. But I do recall our relationship at that point also around the house being somewhat strained. I don't remember us having like happy-go-lucky or happy, friendly, I don't know how to describe it, conversations around the house.
At the time, did you wish it was different? Like now you remember what it was like, but do you remember wishing that it was different at the time? When you tell your story now, is that a period that even matters or not really? You had your friends, you had your world.
Yeah, I had my figuring out to do, I think, at that point. I don't remember it being, again, like I said, I just think it seemed very normal to me that you should not be interested in anything that is going on in my life, and that I shouldn't really understand what's going on in your life. It seemed natural at the time. I don't recall that feeling. I don't recall that feeling like, being abandoned by my brother, or feeling like, longing for something different. It was what it was. Again, I think I've always sort of been a person like this. I think I still am, to a certain extent, a person that kind of takes things for what they are, for better or for worse, and tries to make the best of what it is. I think maybe I'm exaggerating it, but I think that was kind of my approach at that time. I'll take conversations when we can have them, but I'll understand that I'm not exactly interesting to you at the tender age of 12 or however old we were at the time.
Yeah, totally. So funny. I remember
you going away to college, becoming like when you were out of the house, I remember almost in a sense, though I don't see why that would have happened considering the direction that you were going in. I almost feel like we were a little bit closer for a period of time once you went away.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, we can shift. Let's shift to that period. So now you're in high school. I go away to college, and I went away, not that far, like a couple of hours away, but I went away. And I remember, I remember mom and dad being essentially like happy to have me out of the house because by the time I was finishing high school, I think it's safe to say like the cat was out of the bag. Like I was not doing well. I was fighting with mom and dad, always, constantly doing things I'm not supposed to do. Like I remember mom and dad dropping me off in college and just kind of like putting my stuff on a thing, maybe helping me up to the room, maybe not even that, and just kind of like going, okay, you're good. Thank you. You're safe. We dropped you off. Bye.
So I was with you guys when they dropped you off, but I actually don't remember whether or not they helped you. It's hard for me to imagine that mom didn't help you set up your room. It just would be really like, it would be the only time in our lives that mom didn't help us set up our new living situation. What I do remember, I don't remember whether mom and dad were happy or not. I remember coming home. I remember sitting on the steps. We were living in the house in Rochester. I remember this very, very distinctly. Sitting on the steps and crying, bawling my eyes out. I don't remember them necessarily being happy. I can't say whether they felt relief or not that you were out of the house, but I was distraught. Yeah. To me, that was a really, really hard day.
I wish I could give you a hug right now.
I felt like my brother was sort of torn away from me in a sense. It wasn't something I had on my radar, having my brother suddenly move out of the house, and there was something very abrupt feeling about it, I remember. And I missed your presence in the house, even though it was mostly strained, I think, at that point. And I do remember some fights, doors slamming in the house, but to me it was very, very difficult.
That's so interesting. I mean, I actually don't even remember what I felt like to be gone. I just, the memory, the story, the way it sits in my head is literally kind of like things were so tough at home by that point that it was just, there was relief to just like separate. Even though that was without a doubt, having that freedom gave another layer of the wheels coming off. And then,
of course,
remember Allison, my girlfriend at the time, and I broke up that first semester, and it just became a free for all. And literally, I would say probably from that second semester of my first year of college, the way I remember it, and you can tell me if I'm totally wrong about this from your perspective, but like almost until the arrest and the jail and all the insanity, I feel like the rest of that is just, it's not a blur. Like I remember the things that happened, but I got farther and farther away from you guys. I got like literally just week by week. Like you could just month by month, week by week, definitely semester by semester in school, less phone calls, less conversations, less connected. I mean, I literally moved to the other side of the country all the way till by the time the thing was done. Like, and I mean by that, like I got my leg broken in a motorcycle accident and I went to a hospital, to the point where we were I don't even know if we talked for months, maybe even like 6 months or a year in between any conversation you and I would have.
No, I remember that being sort of a black hole of our connection. I don't think we had much at all of interactions. I mean, there were a few specific moments I remember. There was a family wedding. There was your graduation. That was a whole other story.
They were all disasters.
That were all disasters in terms of our interaction. Those are a couple of just instances that I remember distinctly, and the rest is a black, like you said, a blur. It's a black hole of non-existent relationship at that point.
I mean, it's almost like that day that you were describing when I went away. It was almost like foreshadowing. Like you almost knew, oh shit, it's going to get really bad now.
It's weird because in a sense I must have at the time been aware of the strain, because like I said, I do have a recollection of door slamming and you and our parents sort of maybe yelling at each other across doors, which is funny because I don't remember much. I don't remember any of the context. I don't remember what was being said. I don't remember anything at all about that. But I do remember some scenes, if you will, about fights and things. And like I said before, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't have any clue what the fighting was about. So I didn't really have a sense.
It's so crazy, but I'm really glad to hear that, because then you could kind of, well, whatever, my brother and my parents are fighting, but I was always scared that it tainted you. Like my friends would always talk about, hey, should we have Shirley and her friends smoke with us or whatever? I was like, you offer weed to my fucking sister and I will stab you in the neck. And so
I was fully unaware of what was going on.
Good. Feel better.
I think to this day I sort of have a tendency to have, it sounds funny, I don't think I'm ignorant about the world, but I think I tend to kind of leave a screen in between myself and things that are uncomfortable. Sure. So that I don't have to know. I also we always joke that I don't get into the drama with friends in college and med school and residency. I never really get into the drama. So then oftentimes in retrospect, I learn about things that happened while I was around that I had no idea about. And I think that I've always sort of just built a wall between drama and myself so that I don't actually know what is going on, probably purposefully, so that I get to stay distant and comfortably distant. I'm now realizing the connection between staying out of drama with my friends, say in residency, and staying out of the drama in the house. Like really just not interested in knowing details. I don't want to know. I'm not part of this. Leave me alone.
Yeah. So I had when I left and went away, did you get more peace? Like, did the house become more peaceful?
I guess it must have, but I don't remember a distinct. It had to. I mean, I was
slamming of doors.
Definitely must have. I had my moments especially with mom having some issues, but it was never that extensive as with you. It was with me. It was about a couple of very specific things that got in between us, but it must have been more peaceful. I don't remember. I remember taking over your room at some point. That's the only thing I remember.
Had a nice room. Fun.
Yeah, you had a great room, and
the sloping skylight.
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge. Yeah, I remember. I guess it must have been more peaceful in a sense. But I was kind of the pleaser. I was the kid that did things right. I rebelled in my own way, but rather quietly, not like you.
I don't think our family would have made it if there were two of me.
Another one of you. So I kept it more quiet. I went to parties with my friends, but I was always relatively responsible about the things I did that a teenager shouldn't really do, or the things that teenagers in the States especially, but maybe all over now, do. I did them, some of them, but I was a lot quieter about them. I didn't. It came without smoke and
so
and bells and whistles.
So we can talk about, you talked about some of those events, and I think they're relevant because they were like, it's so weird for me to think about it, but I obviously still wanted to be part of the family and still wanted to participate, because like Natalie's wedding, and
you flew across the ocean for this.
Literally. And by the way, nothing that we ever talked about ever, but I tried to quit my drugs for like 2 weeks before so that I wouldn't show up as messed up as I always was, because my whole point was to hide it from you guys always. And so I had a whole plan in place. Like I stopped using almost completely 10 or 11 days before we flew. I couldn't stop completely because I would just pass out the whole time. But then it totally misfired because I made it out there, and I barely made it. I made it through the ceremony, and like their reception. But we were out there for 4 or 5 days or something. And I slept the whole time. I didn't get out of the room. I just slept. And I remember everybody being mad at me. You had quite a temper back then. So when you weren't happy, no, it used to be much worse. When you weren't happy with something, you would let them know. But I remember like trying to get up, trying to go do things, and I was useless. I literally just the way I remember it, I laid in the hotel room for the 4 or 5 days, other than the reception.
Yeah, you're pretty useless. You're right.
I looked ridiculous and terrible because I was 100
you look dead.
pounds.
You look like death.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had no idea what was going on with you. Like, even when I realized that you used something while you were there, and I figured it out, or you said, I don't remember exactly how I knew, but call me really, really naive, but I didn't really understand even then. And I was, how old was I? 18? Like, how old was I at the time?
Probably 18.
17, 18? I had no clue that is what it was. I thought excuse the phrase, but I just thought you were an asshole. I didn't know what your deal was.
But they're not. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think I was an asshole who was addicted to drugs. I don't think
I missed the latter part.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I did things during that period because, again, I was pretty self-centered and like ridiculous as a teenager. But I think a lot of teenagers are. Maybe not to the extent that I was, but a lot of them are. But then around the drug use, yeah, it just got like, I remember even when I would try to show up, it just was a nightmare. It was just a nightmare.
It was weird because you were there, but you weren't there. And so it's almost, in a sense, it felt like it would be better if you just weren't there because you were just a burden in a way.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that makes sense to me to understand that that's what it felt like from the other side, because I didn't make a lot of those appearances. I probably made like literally 3 or 4 over a period of 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all terrible. They were all nightmares.
They were. Like you said, I don't know if it's the temper or if it was just a lot of emotions that had been pent up until those instances. But I remember for the first time in my life, unlike, things that happened in high school where, like I said, I sort of assumed that was, just the way it was. I remember feeling like I hated you.
Yeah.
Like you were the worst brother I could have had during those family encounters. I didn't understand why things were happening like this. Again, call it naive. I don't know why I didn't understand. And I think that if I'd understood, by the way, if someone had opened up to me about it, if I don't know what mom and dad understood was going on or didn't understand, but if they knew, or if you could have told me, or if someone would have, enlightened me about what was going on, I do tend to have the helper side of, like, there's definitely, it's not a coincidence I do what I do, but I think that there's a helper mentality that I have, and if I had known that that's what it came from, that was the source and the reason, then I think things might have actually looked a little different. I maybe have sprung into action.
Well, but I think that's the part, like we were talking about in the beginning, that this is the moment where our family not talking about things just made everything harder. I mean, like, our dad was a physician. Our mom's a pretty smart woman. They knew I was addicted to drugs, or at least using a lot of drugs. You might not have known. But I was like, I weighed less than my girlfriends. Like, I looked like that. Like, I weigh 155 pounds now, and that's like being pretty in shape. I was almost 30 pounds lighter than I am right now. Like, fully anorexic. And nobody ever said a word. Like, no, we talked about me being an insane asshole. Like, that conversation was had, but like, dad never said to me, what are you using? Or not that I remember. Like, what are you using right now?
I was about to ask, did he know? Was he in denial? Did he not understand for whatever reason? Did he not see it because it was his own son?
Mom says when I talked to her once after, she said they thought I used heroin, which I never have. I understand why they would think that, because the stereotype of a heroin user is like this waif, tired person who's passing out all the time. But actually, the reason I would pass out all the time around you every single time is because I never wanted to use drugs around you. So I was using meth, and the only way to stay awake when you're addicted to meth is to keep using meth. Otherwise, you just fall asleep. And so I came to New York to visit, and I made a rule I did not want to use in mom and dad's house. And so I wouldn't, but it was counterproductive, because then I would just pass out. And I don't know why I wasn't smart enough, or I don't know. I didn't have the tools to even have a conversation about it, or even be just freaking be like a regular drug addict and just use around you guys so I could be awake and have conversations with you guys. It was this really weird thing. I didn't want to bring it in, and then I would just be asleep. And that would cause problems, because I mean, I would fly from LA to Israel to New York to visit with you guys. And first day I'd be fine. Second day I'd kind of be okay. Third day I'd be out for the count, and I'd be asleep again. And but Dad never had one conversation with me about it until the accident. When the police arrested me from the motorcycle accident, and he showed up to jail. He showed up to the hospital. And there was a police report saying that they'd found cocaine. I mean, that was the only time, but not the only time. We talked after, but that was the first time Dad ever talked about drugs. And
never acknowledged it before.
And they probably acknowledged it. They were probably like, call me a drug addict. Or like, I don't know but they never sat me down and had like a conversation saying, what's going on? What are you using? That never happened. And so for me, at least, it sounds like maybe even worse than I'd imagined, but like the impression that I had made for myself was pretty accurate in terms of the impact that it had on you growing up.
Yeah, at that point it did. I can't help but wonder about our parents, whether they even understood it or whether they were in some sort of denial about the cause and the gravity of the situation. Whether they understood it in the back of their minds and wouldn't believe it, or whether they really just were blinded to it because it was their own child. Sometimes you just don't even entertain a certain option when it's someone that is close to you.
Sure.
It seems extreme to not talk about it at all if you are aware that this is what's going on.
And you never came to visit when they would come to visit in LA. So they only came out 2 or 3 times. But like I remember, you guys would take spring break vacations. I never came with you. Thank God, by the way, that I never came with you. Like, I would have destroyed those vacations. Because the focus, whenever I was around you guys, the focus was just on me and how I was fucking up. Like, that's it. Nobody could talk about anything else. It was just like, Adidas the fuck up. Can we make it better? And so I'm sure that destroyed any of your experiences, because you're like, I'm here for my favorite cousin's wedding. I don't want to be talking about this asshole who can't wake up. Like, I just want to have a fun time in Europe.
I remember, though, being like in some way disappointed that you didn't come. I must have not been tainted enough to be upset that you didn't come on our vacations. I remember that being sort of a sad thing for me, almost feeling like someone's not making the effort here. I don't know who it is. It's not on me to make that effort, but someone not making the effort to make sure that you come on vacations with us. I sort of excused it away by saying maybe our vacations were at different times.
You guys would go on the East Coast, like you'd go to the Caribbean and stuff, and I was on the West Coast, but it was all...
And also, you were on college spring break schedule, I was on high school spring break schedule, so assuming that it had something to do with that.
I understood exactly why I wasn't invited, and I got it, because like when mom and dad would come to visit, I would always try to put on a front, and I don't know if I was just that good at putting on a front. I mean, I looked like a dead person, so a physician should have known what the fuck is going on,
or think that you're really, really sick.
Yeah, something like
with some illness.
Hospitalization of some sort might be necessary, but they would come and visit at my recording studio, and my pretend thing was always that I was a functional musician. Like the reason I was able to sell drugs and mom and dad never know was because I pretended like I had a music career. And so I made albums and I did all this stuff, but it was all, I mean,
Right.
I wanted it. I wanted it for myself, but it never really made money. I made money selling drugs. And so when mom and dad would come to visit, I would have this thing to show. Like I had a recording studio and they would come and they would see it and I would play them stuff. But even in those moments, man, I mean, I feel like after this show, I got to apologize to mom. I was an asshole in so many ways. It's just insane.
An apology might be in order.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I might have given her like a half-assed one, but if she deserves a real one. I did some really ridiculous things, and it's just insane. And then when it came crashing down, I mean, mom was 100% in denial, like for sure. I know my mom well enough. You know our mom well enough. She's like you. Like she was just like, whatever. I don't want to get involved. He doesn't seem healthy. I'll feed him. Like she just did the thing that it would make sense to do instead of worrying about what's like 14 layers below it. But
Yeah.
But yeah, when the accident happened, I remember when the lawyers called her. Not actually when I got rearrested after the accident, and they called my lawyer called him and was like, "Hey, your son was just arrested for selling drugs." You're like, "You must have the wrong person. It can't be my son." I'm like, "Wow." Like, I would think it'd be. I know people like I was back then, and if somebody said that to me about one of those people I know now, I'd be like, "Oh, that makes sense." Like,
Right.
it would just be so common. But she told her. I think she hung up on the lawyer the first time. She's like, "No, you have the wrong number." They're like, "No, we for sure your son."
It's the right person.
So I'm sorry, I don't want to make this last too long. I know you're on vacation too, and thank you for being.
Everyone is quietly asleep. It's I'm yours.
So when the wheels came off, and I had a motorcycle accident, called, dad showed up the next fucking morning. I mean, like, now I have my own kids, so I understand. But at the time, I literally didn't even know that would happen. Like, we had been so distant and so separated for so long. I didn't know. I think one of not my girlfriend, but like you know her. I'm not going to name her, but like one of the girls that I was hanging out with from the time, her friend called because she knew of my parents, and she called to tell them there was an accident. And I went into surgery, and when I came out, dad was there, as far as I remember. Like literally, first flight out, they caught. And again, I just recorded a podcast about this for not this day, but 2 days from now. And I want to be really clear, like the support that showed back up when I hit the floor from that parachute not opening, is 100% the only reason I'm here. Like I might have done stuff to get myself to this seat right now, but if I hadn't had the support, if mom and dad didn't show up the way they showed up when I needed them, I wouldn't have been able to even do the things.
It's interesting because to me that was dad.
Interesting.
To me, dad always. I say this after having said that it's really weird to me if they didn't understand, and I think they must have been blinded by something, because to me, dad had his first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 100th priority. 100 priorities was our well-being, which is why this whole story is always so strange to me.
Yeah.
There was no doubt in dad's mind that the second he heard you were in a hospital, that he would be on the next flight out. Dad would fly out at the drop of a hat if he knew that you needed him.
Yeah.
If he knew he could be there for you, and it didn't mean doing something for you, but be there for you, sit next to your hospital bed so that when you open your eyes, he would be there, and that was the first thing you would see. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that he would do that. The same way that he would pace the halls at home if he couldn't reach me for 2 hours and didn't know where I was and if I was safe and okay, he would go crazy if he couldn't be there when you were hurt.
Yeah.
That was dad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that it was my own distorted way of looking at the world. And again, that thing that happened with him leaving and like the hate that it had me develop for him, where I kept him at arm's length. And maybe I was good enough at lying to pretend just enough so they would have that internal question, like, is he just not eating all the time and he's getting high like those people in LA? Like maybe they just didn't know that it was that bad. Because I think dad was still either trying to lie to himself or hiding stuff from mom for sure, even after the accident. Like he showed up, I got arrested with some cocaine, I made some other lie about it, and he kind of bought the lie, but then he was in the hospital, and I think he could more see that just like I was not well. And then that played out, and then the trial and all that stuff started, and that's when, to me, that time actually felt, even though I was going to trial and even though I was looking at like a decade or two in prison, I felt like I had my family back. Like it
You
was,
finally felt like we were really there with you.
or like maybe like I was there with you guys. I don't know. I don't know which direction, but like, having you, mom, dad know where I really had been for the last 6 years at that point, it just felt like relief. It was just like I just didn't have to lie and run away anymore.
The truth was out.
Yeah, and I mean, just for everybody listening, there were still many opportunities for you, Shirley, to get mad as hell at me because it wasn't like I was doing everything perfectly. Like I remember, actually, maybe that's not true. It was before the trial. Like you came out to try to help me find a place, but you guys didn't know everything that had happened yet. Like I was still lying. I think that's maybe the main thing. I kept trying to lie and pretend like everything was okay when it really just wasn't. Right? Like we needed a down payment for a condo, and I have some guy show up with a bunch of cash, and mom's like, "Where's this cash coming from?" I'm like, "Don't worry about it." And you guys were like, "What the fuck is wrong with you? Who are you? And what you're not our son. You're not my." And it was, and I just kept trying to keep up this front, until everything went away. Like everything fell apart, and there was just no way for me to even tell a lie anymore. And then it just felt like relief.
Yeah, it must be. It must be a relief to know that. First of all, you don't have to pretend anymore, and second of all, that now that the truth is out, everyone that is supposed to be there for you is actually there for you.
Yeah, I don't even. Again,
after all that time where you probably felt like in your world, your family wasn't there for you. I assume that you felt that way at some point along the road.
No, I really.
And all of a sudden,
I think I knew I distanced myself from you guys. I think I knew it wasn't.
Okay.
I mean, Dad would call me 3 times a week, which is very different than call me every day, which is what he probably really wanted to do. But I'd pissed him off so much, or I'd made things so bad that he would only call me 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, and he was ungrateful.
I had a pager, I had 2 phones, and he would call each one. And like on a cycle, he would go like 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, like just try them. And I wouldn't answer, and he would stop, and then he would call again another day or 2 days later, or whatever. So he tried. I think I knew I was so far down. I was making a conscientious effort to just separate, and didn't want to internally somewhere in a hidden way. But I couldn't even let myself know that at the time. It was just. I had to keep you guys like this, and then again, like when everything. So here's the reason I'm saying it is, I don't know. I was away, right? You guys, I'm assuming when I was away, I mean, maybe Dad worried all the time, but like you got to live your life. Like I wasn't around all the time. That's what it felt like. And then I'm wondering if all of a sudden now your brother is like a drug dealer, potentially going away for a really long time in LA, and you would come with mom and like sit in the court. Like for me, it was a relief. I don't know if for you it was like, what the fuck is happening right now?
I think I was grateful that there was an explanation for the previous few years. I think it was obvious to me that we need to be there for you. I don't think I understood I don't think I let myself think about what it might mean for you. Jail is a very scary word for someone who's not in that world.
Yeah.
It's probably a very scary word for everybody, but it's especially scary for someone who's not in that world. And I think I detached from that picture, from that image, immediately. I think I came with sort of similar to mom, with a sense of, all right, one step at a time. Let's get over this and through this and be there for him with this and come help him find an apartment and move his stuff out of this place and take his car from from point A to point B. I think there was a lot of things that were left unclear. There were some friendships I think you were still in that were unclear whether they were healthy friendships at the time.
I mean, once the big trial stuff started, the vast majority of it cleaned up just by I don't know what in my head jumped into saying, no, that's a lie. It wasn't in my head. Dad and some people at rehab tried to get me to change my number and disconnect from all those friendships. It took them 2 months to talk me into it. But I think I realized I didn't have the wherewithal. I didn't have the power to be okay with those people around.
Right.
Yeah. So at the time it wasn't, because for me it was a big relief. For you it was being a good sister, a good family member, or whatever the need was in the moment. But I'm right. It sounds like I say a lot of times that people look at this outcome and it seems like it was just, oh yeah, well, you're going to get over your addiction and just kind of be in this place. But I say it all the time, not only when I was facing trial and not only when I went to jail, but even when I got out of jail, I know that for sure because we had this conversation. People might have been hopeful, you might have had hope, but there was definitely not the expectation that it's over.
I think we all treaded very carefully.
Well, what does that mean?
I think we just had, I don't want to use the word disappointment. I think we had all been disappointed or in some way almost had the ground taken out from under us several times during this process, during those years, that we wanted to be there for you. We wanted to help you through it. We didn't know how. I don't think any of us had ever been part of anything like this. I certainly hadn't. I assume my mom and dad hadn't either. And yeah, of course. And I think that we just wanted to help in any way we could and not put a lot of external pressure for any expectations other than let's just get through this day without causing any more issues. Let's get through this day without you falling through another crack. Let's try to make sure that was really rock bottom and that it's only up from here, but very, very carefully without having a lot of expectations for a week from now, a year from now, and so on. Just let's get through this.
So what was that like for you? I mean, you just finished undergrad, or you're wrapping up. You went to fucking Cornell.
What year was it?
2001. Right before, 10 days before my birthday in 2001, I got arrested. The court date was all the way through November of 2002. I went to jail in November of 2002.
Yeah, so I must have been somewhere between finishing undergrad and the beginning of med school.
So, this is a pretty intense period already in life. Applying to med schools, getting in, finishing college. What was that like? You guys would come out here maybe not once a month, but close to once a month. You guys would fly out, you and mom. You guys always alternated. Dad would come by himself, you and mom would come together because you guys needed the support. I guess, I don't know, dad would just show up every month, every time there was a court date.
Yeah, dad would definitely come the most. He was there again, anytime he was needed, he would just find a ticket and go. There was no sitting and thinking and calculating. It was just, all right, Adi needs me there, I'm going. I leave.
I did. I didn't even know it, but I did. I see so many people who go through that kind of stuff alone, and it destroys them.
There was never a doubt in his mind.
You guys were always there.
For me, again, I think my innate ability to compartmentalize, I still functioned, I think, almost as if nothing happened.
Yeah.
Maybe subconsciously something was there, but in a sense, I did what I wanted to do and needed to do back home or in college, and I was dealing with my own stuff. Yeah. And when there was an opportunity to come and be there for you and do things and also be there for mom, like you said, I think maybe a big part of it was also just knowing that I need to be strong and be there for mom through this. I know she had a lot of turmoil in her head also in terms of how this looks and who to tell what and who knew and who was exposed to what part of the story, before knowing that you would become who you are now and that the story would be out.
Yeah, I think for 2 years after all this, we really didn't tell anybody.
It was hard for her to drop that image of the quote unquote perfect family.
Yeah. Which again is interesting, right? When I went away for 6 years, you could still hold the image because who the fuck knows what Adi is doing in California? Oh, he's a musician. He uses an album.
He wanted to leave Buffalo and go to California after seeing campus there, and no one thought this would happen. He applied and got in and left. I mean, that's a success story, that it was. I
think I'm glad it translated the same for you because one of the things that I always say is, well, I always talk about like the need to be perfect, but it's even a shift from that. It's the need to look perfect. At least you might not have to be perfect, but it'll look perfect.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of that. There's no doubt.
You handled it well, and I'm so grateful. Honestly, I'm so grateful that mom and dad had you to. I'm sure it took a toll on you because you had to kind of. It's almost like you had to measure up for both of us. You had to you had to do what the normal great daughter would do, but then like create enough capital, like create enough good in the family to rebalance them after they would have a conversation about how I was just fucking up world.
I wonder if I felt that pressure subconsciously. I don't remember it that way. I don't remember feeling pressure. And that I remember feeling pressure that I had put on myself. I always assumed I was the one pressuring myself. I mean, I still have, it's always a joke when people ask you about strengths and weaknesses. It sounds so cliche and so terrible to say perfectionist, but perfectionism is a real weakness.
Yeah.
And I think that I always had that, and I always was the one putting a lot of pressure on myself. So I never felt like it was an external source of pressure.
Sure. And I don't know that I don't know that it was, and I don't know that you would feel it that way, but I feel like I left a void, and not just even a void of absence. I left a negative balance in
negative in the universe.
Well, at least in our family's universe,
Yeah.
Because any interaction, literally from probably 16 to 25, which is 9 years in a family, that's a long freaking time.
Those are formative years.
Because 25 is when I got arrested. 26, I was in jail. 27, I got out. And really, even at 27, it was not at all clear that I was going to have a normal life. Like, even when I got into grad school, I remember Dad did not, and our dad, so you will understand the weight of this. Dad and I decided that I shouldn't apply to medical school. And that for our dad to try to dissuade me from applying to medical school, he really didn't trust yet.
Yeah.
He really, and thank God, by the way, because I don't know that any state would give me a license given where I went in my life. It would have been a huge uphill battle to even, I mean, I was a 9-time convicted felon. Like, they don't give licenses to those people.
Not easily.
Not easily. And so that might have been a really amazing thing. But I also know having the wherewithal, because again, I don't know if it was the drugs or not, but I was a selfish asshole for a very long period of my life. And so now, having had that connection with Dad after everything happened, I remember realizing when we had that conversation that, wow, he's not quite sure that I'm on the other side of this. Because if our dad wanted one thing more than anything, it would have been for me to become a physician.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know about this.
No, we talked about it. He was like, I don't think that might be too much right now. Why don't you apply to? And so I applied for the master's at Cal State Long Beach, and then I don't know if it felt that way for you guys, but like then the momentum started building up, and like that's really when things started shifting for the good. I got relief from going to jail and being clear, and like you guys knowing actually what my life looked like. But it was when school kicked in and I was back and the grades started coming in, and all of a sudden I was a good student, and like it was just like now the snowball started going the other way.
I remember I have a vague memory of being really happy knowing that you were proud of something. I don't remember what it was. It might have been the first grades or something like that came through, or some sort of comment on something.
I don't know if that was
but
a big scholarship.
I remember you being proud and sort of feeling like a sense of relief from that. That if you were proud of a scholastic achievement, then a switch must have happened.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Because I don't remember you ever. I didn't remember with all of those stories about you being very smart and having an amazing ability and incredible potential, which you really did and do have. I never remember you seeming genuinely proud of something education-wise, like school-wise, scholastic-wise. I don't remember thinking that you were proud of something like this until this vague memory.
Yeah. It's hard to be proud of things when your whole life is kind of a lie. Just, it's not. Even the albums, like I was proud of the music that we made, but it wasn't really my life,
Yeah, there's a bigger story.
Always. Yeah, so that, I mean, to me, that was the beginning of where we are now, right? The starting to actually be proud of things that got done. And so, yeah, I mean, that was really when I started feeling like I think whatever is out there every day for the arrest and for everything that came out of that, just because I don't know that I would have had the wherewithal myself to ever correct. I was not thinking, how do I make this better at the time? It was just digging a deeper and deeper hole.
Yeah, I'm just glad that, obviously it could have ended differently.
Yeah. And for a lot of families it does, right?
Yeah, I always think about that it was an amazing transformation.
Yeah.
That I don't think I could have imagined in my wildest dreams, but that it really was, like you said, maybe it was a blessing that you had the accident. It was a blessing that you were sort of physically disabled for a little while and needed the help, such that everybody became more aware of what was going on, and like you said, was there for you, because you're the one that did the hard work. I mean, none of us got the master's and none of us got the PhD and none of us got into everything that you did, but you had the support. And I think that was obviously that was a huge turnaround point. Huge. And we're lucky. It's funny to say we're lucky about a horrendous motorcycle accident, but
honestly, I think everything all the time that accident happened. It was the biggest like stop sign for me of literally like you have to stop. You cannot move. And after that accident, it seemed like everything got worse for 3 years. It seemed like the world actually fell apart. but it was that world that fell apart so that I could create a new world. And if that world hadn't fallen apart, you can't live in half of one of those worlds and half of the regular one.
No,
Like,
no.
that world
You
is,
needed to go through that.
yeah, bless you. Wow, this was really great. I'm glad we finally got to talk about this stuff.
Me too. It's kind of crazy to hear the inner workings, even things that you don't necessarily say. And I've heard your story, and I've heard you talk about it and lecture on it and present it in various ways. But the inner workings of what was going on with you at that point are something that's more of a personal thing, like more for you and I to discuss than necessarily a general lecture topic. And it was interesting to hear and to think about me and what I saw, because I don't usually sit and analyze what exactly happened. But it's a good exercise sometimes.
I mean, I'm grateful to this day. I married a woman who doesn't let shit go. So we talk about everything. And
Right.
I say it like that, not jokingly. I mean, I come from such an avoidant background where I cannot talk to you for years about anything like deep, or at least deep inside of me. Like, we can have
Right.
philosophical conversations, but I don't have to admit the pains that I'm going through. And so, as you know, Sophie,
Emotions.
Yeah, as you know, Sophie, she's the opposite. Like, Sophie will talk about any emotion in the most direct way ever. And you're like, holy shit, did you just say that? Okay, let's have the conversation. So
True.
So there don't get to be rocks. There don't get to be little hidden crevices, which I love. I love. I didn't know that I would want it, but I love it because, look, I mean, it scares me a little bit that things could get that bad. Not a little bit. It scares me a lot that things could get that bad, because at no point in the middle of the story was there any like malicious intent to make them that terrible. It was like this really ridiculous, they say like the death by 1,000 cuts. It was that. It was like, oh, this little thing didn't hurt that much, and that little thing didn't hurt that much, and that little thing didn't. And holy shit, I'm looking at 18 years in prison. Like,
Right.
And I say it all the time.
Snowball.
I don't come from a family where that was even on the radar. So
Of course not.
So it was really insane. But I'm really glad that we got to talk, because like I said, we've never had this conversation ever. But we are so close. Like, our family is so close, and I love you so much, and I'm so glad we get to have this version of life, really, since whatever, I was 27 or 28. So, going on 15 years now.
Yeah, today I'm very, very happy with our relationship. I wish we were physically closer, but we certainly remedied, I think, that relationship.
Yeah.
Had a lot of band-aids over it for a while, but I think that I actually think this conversation probably could also, probably would be beneficial as well, to have all that stuff sort of out in the open. I can kind of, I see what you mean by this. It kind of feels like a sort of a wound that hadn't been discussed, and I can live with it, but it does feel better to have it be out and out in the open and having been aired out, so to speak.
Yeah, and obviously that's easier once things are fixed. It's much, much more difficult to have when you're in the middle of the pain. I just think it can make the pain shorter, because even in the moment of even in all the craziness, like if I would have just had conversations about hating Dad because he left, we could have probably made things better.
As you're very right. I think all of these discussions, me knowing what was going on at the time, could have made things better, because I probably would have carried less anger towards you during all those times and the years that we weren't close. But I think at any given point, having discussed it and understood and knowing what the other one was going through could have probably made things better.
Yeah.
We just discussed a lot of times where we didn't know what was going on with the other person.
Yeah.
Neither of us.
Totally. Well, I want to say I'm sorry for all the incredible, ridiculous pain over that time. I didn't take into consideration the impact that it had on you, and that sucks, and I'm sorry.
I obviously have forgiven you multiple times over at this point, and I feel after talking about how my point of view looked, I feel sorry that I didn't know what was going on. That I probably could have actually helped in some way if I had understood. I wish I had known what was going on, because I bet I could have sort of stood up and shaken somebody into doing something earlier. Well, maybe without the accident, but
I always look at it this way: we have kids now, and part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation, and part of the reason I want all this work, all this radical transparency stuff, is I want to try to correct whatever can be corrected for the next generation,
For sure.
It scares me. I mean, Leo, it scares me on a regular basis that I could be faced with the exact same thing that I created in my own family. And it's, and actually, I say Leo, but that's actually the wrong thing to say, because when I was a kid, I was like Kai, you just don't know. You just don't know.
Who's the one?
Well, but I think it comes from alienation. It comes from not feeling right, not feeling connected, etc. So I'm really glad we got to have this conversation. I feel closer. I don't know if you do as well, but I feel closer.
I certainly do. I definitely do.
And I think Mom deserves one of these calls, not on the podcast maybe, but one of these calls.
I agree. I think it would be probably healing for her to hear some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think she's forgiven basically everything as well, but it's in both of our nature to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it could be helpful to actually hear it.
Totally.
Nonetheless.
Absolutely. Thank you for being willing to do this. I know you weren't really excited about the concept. I hope it worked out better than
It definitely did. I was worried about doing a podcast, but I'm actually extremely happy about how it turned out. I'm glad that we had this conversation.
Me too.
And I love you.
I love you. For those of you tuned in, I'll do a little closing for this, but I just want you to remember that no matter how shitty things get, and I mean that in the most sincere way, there's always a way out. It might seem like hell. You might literally have to walk through fire to get there, and it may seem nearly impossible when you first think of it, or you may not even be able to imagine what it's like, but it starts with conversations. It starts with talking, and my talking got brought on by a SWAT team, but it doesn't have to, right? You don't have to wait for a SWAT team to come take you down, to just talk to the people around you about what's actually going on. And when you make that move, when the revelation comes and you're not lying like that anymore, I think it makes everything else a lot easier.
Not even a metaphorical SWAT team.
No. A literal SWAT team. All right. So thank you all for tuning in. See you on the flip side. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.